For most of human history, money was not an idea. It was a thing. Heavy, tangible, measurable. Gold and silver coins could be weighed, clipped, tested, and trusted because their value existed independently of whoever minted them. But today, we live in a world where money is almost entirely abstract. Numbers on screens, digits in databases, value sustained by collective belief. That reality feels so normal that it's easy to forget how recent it is. In fact, the idea that money is worth something simply because we all agree that it is did not truly take hold until the late 20th century. To understand how we got here, we have to talk about paper money, trust, and the long, complicated rise and fall of the gold standard. Whenever we talk about history, we usually stop short of the modern era. It's hard to gain perspective on events that are still unfolding around us. But the story of the gold standard forces us to push forward into the 20th century, because the system that defines our money today only emerged within living memory. The gold standard wasn't an ancient relic abandoned in medieval times. It survived world wars, industrial revolutions, and global empires. And when it finally collapsed, it didn't do so quietly. Paper money itself was always a risky idea. The earliest forms appeared in China during the Tang and Song dynasties, when merchants began using promissory notes instead of hauling heavy coins across long distances. The idea was practical, but it relied entirely on trust. A piece of paper had no intrinsic value. Its worth came from the promise that it could be exchanged later for something real. When paper money eventually made its way to Europe centuries later, that same problem followed it everywhere it went. To solve this problem, early paper currencies were often backed by something tangible, usually precious metals. This is where the gold standard enters the story. At its core, the gold standard was simple. Paper money represented a claim on gold. At any time, in theory, you could take your banknote to a bank or treasury and exchange it for a fixed amount of gold. The paper wasn't the value. The gold was. The paper was just a convenient stand-in. This system did not mean that people actually carried gold around in daily life. Instead, gold sat in vaults while paper circulated. That distinction mattered. By separating money from the physical metal while still tying its value to gold, governments gained flexibility. They could issue paper currency more easily than minting coins, expand the money supply when necessary, and still maintain confidence by promising convertibility. Naturally, people asked an obvious question. If tying money to gold limits how much money can exist, doesn't that bring us right back to the original problem? Isn't the whole point of paper money to escape the constraints of scarce metals? The answer, historically, was complicated. The gold standard didn't eliminate limits, but it softened them. Paper money backed by gold allowed governments and banks to stretch the system, sometimes responsibly, sometimes dangerously, without abandoning trust altogether. The gold standard emerged not just as an economic choice, but as a response to real historical problems. One of the biggest was inflation. It didn't take long after paper money became common for rulers and governments to realize they could simply print more of it. More money meant more spending power, at least at first. But as more notes flooded the economy, each individual note became worth less. Inflation eroded savings, wages lagged behind prices, and public trust collapsed. This problem wasn't confined within borders. As international trade expanded during the Industrial Revolution, paper money created chaos between countries. Merchants could no longer simply weigh coins to determine value. Instead, they were handed unfamiliar pieces of paper, issued by foreign governments with no obvious way to know what they were worth. Trade stalled not because goods weren't available, but because trust was missing. The gold standard solved both problems at once. Inflation was constrained because money issuance was tied to gold reserves. Exchange rates stabilized because currencies could be compared through their gold value. If one country defined an ounce of gold as worth 20 units of its currency, and another defined it as worth 2 units, the exchange rate became obvious. Trade flowed more easily, and confidence returned. Britain played a central role in spreading the gold standard. In the early 19th century, the British economy faced a dilemma. Much of its silver had flowed into China as payment for tea and other goods. Gold, not silver, became the logical metal to anchor the currency. As the world's leading industrial and naval power, Britain's adoption of the gold standard carried enormous influence. Other nations followed, and by the mid-1800s, gold had become the backbone of the global monetary system. The system wasn't perfect. Wars strained it repeatedly. During major conflicts in the 19th century, countries suspended gold convertibility to print money for military expenses. But what mattered was that they returned to gold afterward. Peace meant rebuilding gold reserves, tightening currency issuance, and restoring trust. Despite shocks like major gold discoveries, the gold standard held together remarkably well for decades. Then came World War I. The scale of the conflict shattered assumptions that had underpinned global finance for generations. The cost of modern industrial war was simply too high. Nations abandoned the gold standard en masse to print money for weapons, supplies, and soldiers. Inflation surged. International trade became distorted. When the war ended, many countries found themselves unable to return to gold. Their economies were weakened, their debts enormous, and their currencies unstable. Germany's experience became the most infamous. Burdened by war reparations and economic collapse, it descended into hyperinflation in the early 1920s. Paper money became so worthless that people used it as fuel or wallpaper. Attempts to stabilize currencies through alternative backing systems failed, and trust evaporated. Some countries, like Britain, tried to force a return to the gold standard through public appeals and economic sacrifice. Others lacked the resources entirely. And when the Great Depression struck, the rigidity of gold became a liability. Countries still on the gold standard struggled to respond. They couldn't easily expand the money supply or stimulate their economies. Ironically, nations that abandoned gold earlier often recovered faster. Still, many believed the crisis was temporary. Surely, once stability returned, the world would restore the gold standard. After all, without gold, how could money be real? Then came World War II. Economically, it was even more devastating than the first. By the time the war ended, the United States held the majority of the world's gold reserves. Other major economies were in ruins, deeply indebted, and desperate for stability. This imbalance led to a new solution, the Bretton Woods system. Instead of returning to a traditional gold standard, the world adopted a hybrid system. The US dollar would be directly convertible to gold. All other major currencies would be pegged to the dollar. This made the dollar the world's reserve currency and positioned the United States at the center of global finance. For a time, it worked. Trade expanded, economies rebuilt, stability returned. But success created new problems. As global trade grew, dollars flowed overseas. The US began running deficits, while foreign governments accumulated dollar reserves. Eventually, confidence cracked. In the 1960s, countries like France began demanding gold in exchange for their dollars. Gold flowed out of the United States. The system became unsustainable. In 1971, President Richard Nixon ended gold convertibility. The dollar was no longer backed by gold. Within years, most currencies floated freely. For the first time in roughly 6,000 years, humanity accepted money not as a thing, but as an idea. That shift defines the world we live in today. So here's the question that matters. Was the gold standard a necessary foundation that outlived its usefulness, or did abandoning it trade stability for convenience? If money only works because we believe in it, what happens when belief falters? And as inflation, debt, and digital currencies reshape the future, should gold remain a relic of the past or a lesson we haven't fully learned? If this history changed how you see money, make sure to like the video, subscribe for more deep dives like this, and share your thoughts in the comments. Was leaving the gold standard inevitable, or was it the moment money truly became fragile?